Let's continue the conversation now with David Brudenell, the Executive Director of Australia's only publicly listed AI company, Decider. He joins me here in the studio. David, great to see you. What did you think of the PM speech?
I thought it was a good first step, but it is what really Australia does best, which is a resource-based government. And like what I heard yesterday was an infrastructure plan wrapped in an AI wrapper. It was really missing the important piece, which is sovereignty. And geography is not sovereignty.
What do you mean by that?
Well, to achieve sovereignty in its true sense, from an AI perspective, you need four things. You need policy sovereignty, you need compute sovereignty, you need data sovereignty, and you need model sovereignty. And a three-legged stool, as that's what's currently being proposed, is not as stable as a four-legged stool. And model sovereignty is the difference. And what that means is, like AI for the first time, it's not what you do in terms of your job, it's how you do the thing. It's how the citizens' knowledge of within Australia. And that's not being addressed in the current policy standpoint, which is very dangerous because companies like Anthropic and OpenAI are coming in, trying to buy essentially, or get in the foxes in the hen house, to be able to get into essentially this sovereign knowledge that every citizen in Australia has. And they're going to extract it out into an American private company, and they're going to rent it back to us. When
you're talking about model sovereignty, what are the options here, though? Because OpenAI, Anthropic are so far ahead of any other company in the world. What's not talked about a lot is how close China is, though, with their own large language models. Is that the only choice between China and the United States?
No, it's not. No, it's not. Every foreign nation has the ability to create your own large language model.
How far behind would we be, though?
I think it, you really have to think about the different types of frontier models. So you don't need a Ferrari to do everything in your company or in the nation. And I think that's what these Anthropic or China and Australia are racing towards. From a national security standpoint, having a real frontier model is very important from a defense standpoint. But when you're talking about enterprise and when you're talking about citizens using the model, you don't need Ferrari tokens, which is what Anthropic and OpenAI are promoting. You can have a Holden token, right, to be able to do that work. So in terms of speed, realistically, it takes 6 to 12 months to be able to create a federal or a Australian sovereign large language model.
Will we be doing it with their infrastructure or starting from scratch?
No, you'd want to use Australian infrastructure. There's a US Cloud Act, which essentially says that if you're using any US-based or US-owned data provider or data center, that means the US government can go and look through that data, which obviously we don't want.
There are allies, though. How can...
Yeah, there are Five Eyes. Yeah, there are Five Eyes, but what we're talking about something different with AI. We're talking about our citizens' knowledge, right? And that's how our courts decide. That's how our educators teach. That's how our musicians create beautiful music. And those are very Australian things. So if we have foreign...
the cultural aspect, and, if I can really dumb it down, it's like what you put into ChatGPT and what it spits out is you want it to have an Australian accent on it.
Very much, very much. The underlying models that we all use today in Australia are American trained. They have American values in them. They have American data in them. And when businesses like Anthropic and OpenAI say they're going to fine-tune the model using Australian cultures, it's been proven that fine-tuning really kind of goes away when you really start to push these models and they revert back to American values.
Right. But isn't that part of what the Prime Minister's talking about, putting in place these guardrails so that would happen? Or do you think it wasn't even thought about in that speech yesterday?
I don't think that was addressed by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is really talking about energy, hydro, and what we're doing is we're trading our citizens' knowledge for kind of a big building out in the bush. And what we really want to be focusing on is our citizens' knowledge and protecting that and how we do that. Now, there are sovereign data center providers here in Australia, which is a good first step, and we want to be able to promote those and to put those at the top of the list. But the next and most important stage is to be able to now start putting policy in place to start capturing and codifying our citizens' knowledge, because that knowledge will become an export category in the future. There are a lot of countries outside of Australia who want to buy our values, who want to buy the way that we do things. And if we don't do that, then the Americans or the Chinese will extract it out of our citizens and they will rent it back to us at increasing cost.
So you're taking for want of a better term, a more protectionist approach. You see Australia eventually be able to compete with these AI giants in the United States. At the moment, the only growth we're seeing is in the economy and investment is in data centres, and a lot of this is foreign capital. How do you see that as an opportunity? Is it a risk if we let the Anthropics of this world pass us by who've said they want to make Australia their second home?
Yeah, well, I think we have a burgeoning data center, the kind of domestic data center economy being created, which I think is fantastic. You got to, again, look at Australia from a geopolitical, from a geographic perspective. We're in a prime location around the world when it comes to AI and AI penetration. And so we want to do both, right? We want to be able to invite these companies into our borders to be able to build the data centers, but we want them to be data center providers in concert with our sovereign providers. But the most important thing is we don't want to let them define the way or the spirit of Australia or how we capture our knowledge in our country. That is a very, very critical thing that we want to protect because it will be an export category in the future. Other countries will want to buy Australian knowledge, and we want to make sure that we own it. Because, you know, if you look at, for example, the iPhone, we're downstream. We create the necessary minerals and resources that provide and power those iPhones, but we don't capture any of the profit from that. That's all captured in American companies.
Well, that's a good point as well, because Anthropic and OpenAI are not yet profitable companies, so they wouldn't be paying a tax on their profits here in Australia. That's a whole other argument, I guess. But the hurdle before we even get to this kind of investment is copyright. I do not see where, I can't for the life of me see where the government's going to go with this, because the AI companies seem to be saying, well, we need to train these large language models, and the government's saying, well, you need to pay for it. Anthropic and the like don't want to set that precedent. What's the way through there as you see it? Where do you think that'll end up?
Yeah, they certainly don't want to pay for it, and in actuality, they've likely already taken it to train their models.
That's right, isn't it? Because they can do it from overseas and it doesn't breach any laws.
Yeah, very much. I mean, these businesses have said they've, you know, the New York Times is suing OpenAI. They've done a deal with Reddit. These businesses have already taken in most of the data into their models. So what we're looking at is net new information going into these models. And it's how do you price that? And I think that's the really important thing. Like, this is a copyright law exercise. This is not necessarily an AI regulation exercise. However, it's important to know that, you know, when that musician is creating that new piece of art, or when the author is writing that new book, we don't know yet how that is going to be used across, you know, within AI. This is not a Spotify type of pricing exercise. This is how can this amazing piece of technology take that particular corpus or that book, and how can it could, you know, if you write a book, it could potentially be used in federal policy, it could be used in music generation, it could be used in teaching children, it can be used in such a different way than we think about it, that there's a big risk that we're going to deeply underprice those things. But you know, I can balance it out against, you know, artists wanting to make sure they're being paid for what they're producing today. So it's actually a very tough piece of work to kind of legislate through. But I think we need to have debate on it, certainly, because again, going back to what I said before, you know, the spirit of Australia, what our citizens produce is of high and intense value, and for the first time, we can actually start to sell it globally, which is really exciting.
David, a lot to think about. You've given us a lot to think about. Thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.